Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the last video in my series of March of the Machine Commander deck techs. I've covered every legendary creature from March of the Machine's main set, the extra legends from Mom Jumpstart, the special pre-release promos, and now the non-face legends from the Mom Commander product. Check out the playlist in the video's description if you want to see what I did for all of them, and if you have a request for my next big series of commanders, let me know in the comments below. As you see, today our commander is Saint Traft and Karolus. Saint Traft and Karolus, from the plane of Innistrad. Both of these characters are such fearsome warriors that they separately became renowned for their prowess in battle. Saint Traft was so skillful in life that even Avacyn's warrior Seraphs trusted him and fought at his side, while Karolus is a mercenary Thraben Inquisitor who's earned numerous titles, all based on his ability to slay monsters. As with the previous 4 team-ups, we don't have any lore on this pairing, but the histories of these two fighters speak for themselves. I can only imagine Thalia and the Gitrog monster giving these two the side eye as both pairs cut their respective swaths through the Phyrexian invaders, proving once again that Innistrad is not a wise vacation spot. I'm excited to share this deck with you, but before we get started, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why it's such a cool card and why I put it at the head of my deck. So I take about 30 cards and put it toward whatever my commander wants me to do. This is our game plan. It's what we do at the table and how we try to win. 30 more cards go towards supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction pieces. I usually run 1 or 2 sweepers, sometimes more if it would play into the game plan, sometimes none, and I always keep to a floor of 38 lands, so I can make sure I hit my land drops and I can cast my spells so I can play the game. Let's talk about our team-up commander now. This is Saint Traft and Karolus, a 3/4 legendary spirit and a human, for Jeskai mana, so a blue, a red, and a white. It says, whenever Saint Traft and Karolus becomes tapped, create a 1/1 red human creature token if this is the first time this ability has resolved this turn. If it's the second time, create a 1/1 blue spirit creature token with flying, and if it's the third time, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. So every time Saint Traft and Karolus, who I'm going to call Stark, S-T-A-R-K, every time it becomes tapped during our turn, we look and see how many times it's become tapped. And if it's the first time, we get a 1/1 human. The second time, a 1/1 spirit with flying. The third time, a 4/4 angel with flying. And if we can tap it after that, we don't get any rewards for that. So how do we untap it? Well, whenever we cast a spell that has Convoke, untaps Saint Traft and Karolus. Convoke, as you know, is a mechanic that lets our creatures help us cast spells. Whenever we cast a spell with Convoke, we can pay for it with mana, or by tapping creatures, 1 creature per pip of mana that we're paying, or any combination of the two. And when we do that, each creature we tap pays for either a single generic mana, or a mana of the color that creature is. So Stark can pay for blue, red, white, or generic mana, since it has all 3 of those colors in its casting cost. Honestly, I gotta say, this card is so cool. On the surface, it appears to be a Convoke commander, rewarding us for using it to convoke out other spells by giving us increasingly strong tokens, as well as untapping itself so we can do it again. But that's not the only thing we can do here. Stark makes their first token every time they're tapped, not just when we use them to convoke a spell, meaning all they have to do is attack in order to recruit a new Stensian human token, and maybe they'll find other friends along the way. Now, a 3/4 for 3 mana is solid, but without any keyword abilities like Flying or Menace, combat won't remain the best way we can tap our commander. Besides, if we're making a bunch of tokens, what can we use them for? The answer is obvious when you think about the gothic horror plane of Innistrad. Driving race cars. That's right, vehicles. We turn Stark sideways to get a bigger body online and take advantage of whatever keyword or triggered abilities it comes with. We don't mind attacking with that vehicle because Stark made a chump blocker when we used it to crew, and even if those humans tokens stick around, they'll be able to climb into the driver's seat soon enough. Simple. In fact, too simple. Like I said, our commander has a lot of ways to play, and I built them several different ways before I settled on this one. We have a number of things going on, and they all connect with each other, so let me explain. Yes, we need ways to tap our commander in order to make these tokens, and vehicles are the biggest one in this deck. But we have other options for tapping Stark as well. Stationing Spacecraft gives us access to tap outlets that prop up our game plan early, and later become big artifact flyers that stay crewed, quote unquote. We have cards that let us simply tap our creatures for value as well, making mana or tokens or making our threats bigger. And of course, we're running Convoke sources to trigger our commander's untap ability so that we can use it again in the same turn, getting bigger tokens each time. Or at least better ones. Even though we have so many ways to tap our creatures for our vehicles, from another perspective, this is actually more of a tokens deck. We aren't just filling up the board with humans and sometimes spirits and angels, but about 20 other kinds of other creature tokens as well. They make up for our lower creature count and ensure our vehicles are always crewable, our spacecraft are well stationed, and we never miss out on any of the value we can get from our Convoke spells. It doesn't end there. Many of our vehicles make tokens on their own, letting us crew those vehicles or other ones right away, since Summoning Sickness isn't relevant for crewing, stationing, or convoking. Our high numbers of artifacts and tokens mean we have sub-themes of both, giving us rewards for making tokens or playing artifacts or simply having a lot of both on the board. We have cards that care about our permanents being tapped or untapped, as well as ways to manipulate that. We even have an alternate win con that can wake up our board at the same time we put the game to bed. Like I said, there are a bunch of ways to build St. Traft and Karolus, and this is just one of them, but it's a huge amount of fun. Our commanders are so famous that just seeing them test drive one of our jalopies draws a crowd. Soon, we're putting our gathering throng behind the wheel of each new and pre-owned vehicle we have on the lot, giving each of them the chance to feel the wind in their hair. Once we can get our deck on the highway, we open the throttle, and it feels like we could drive ourselves straight to the moon. Our opponents can barely keep pace with all the tokens, tapping, and tricks we have in store, and we let ourselves come up to speed in a gradual but ever-increasing way. Our tank is full, and our engine is tuned, and we aren't afraid to change gears when the game requires it. Small, incremental game actions give us bursts of velocity to close gaps and overtake opponents, ensuring all we have to do to be first over the finish line is tap the Accelerator. You'll enjoy this deck if you like a flexible, unpredictable strategy built on a solid value commander and a ton of game objects. Or if you like fiddling with the gears and knobs of a silly machine that spits out tokens and trinkets until it buries your opponents in them. So, as usual, this Moxfield list we're going over today is linked in the video's description. At the bottom of this Moxfield list, you will see a considering section full of cards that I considered putting in this deck, and many of which I tried to, but you can only make room for so many cards. However, if you have a bigger budget or a smaller one, if you have an interest in one of the focuses of this deck and you want to emphasize it, or if you like the synergy here and you want to pivot to an even more synergistic version of this, maybe something that cares about human typal, then the considering section is a great place for you to start when you build your own St. Traft and Karolus deck. So we're going to go over our game plan first. We're going to start with a pretty small section. It's our Convoke section. These are cards that have or give our other spells Convoke. So we're going to start, not in order, but with Wildfire Awakener. Wildfire Awakener is X, 1, a red, and a white for a 3/2 human wizard with Convoke, meaning it costs at least 3 mana, because we can have X be 0, but we can also just Convoke all of our creatures at the same time, because X can be any number we want. Meaning, as long as we've got a red and a white and one other mana available to us, or creatures that is, we can tap our entire board into this X and just get it huge. We can also tap our mana for this, of course. So if we've got 6 mana in play and 6 creatures, we can tap all of our mana as long as we're, producing a red and a white, and all of our creatures as long as we've got a red and a white among them if we didn't get it from our mana, and X becomes 9. X is, when the Wildfire Awakener enters, we make a number of 1/1 red elemental creature tokens that, when they become tapped, they deal 1 damage to a player equal to X. So if we tapped 6 creatures and 6 mana to pay for Wildfire Awakener, we'd get a 3/2 creature and then 9 of these little 1/1s that all burn players, or a player rather, when they get tapped. So they're even better than the little devil tokens that ping someone when they die. So pretty sweet. A nice way for us to do a big Convoke for us. And when we do it with our commander, it will not just make a extra token when our commander gets tapped to cast this, but also untap our commander, so if we tap them for something else that same turn, we're going to make a better token afterwards. We also have the Wandering Rescuer. This is 3 and double white for a 3/4 legendary human samurai noble with flash, convoke, and double strike. So we can flash her out by tapping a bunch of our creatures, and we probably want to because the Wandering Rescuer gives all of our other creatures that are tapped hexproof. So this is one of our best protective abilities. We have lots of ways to tap our board at instant speed because crew doesn't require us to do it at sorcery speed the way that station does. Even if we don't have a Convoke spell like the Wandering Rescuer, we can always just overcrew one of our vehicles, and now all of the things that we used to crew with, since that's us paying a cost, we can do it in response to, some other effect. And now they all have hexproof. Plus, this is a 3/4 double striker that we can flash out. What a great blocker. What a great attacker. Yeah. And we have Calamity of Cinders. This is one of our Wraths. 5 and double red for a sorcery with Convoke that says it deals 6 damage to each untapped creature. So the idea is, hopefully, we have the right colors and the right number of creatures that we can take 7 of our creatures and tap them for Calamity of Cinders, meaning we don't have to pay any mana for it, and we've protected all of those creatures. The only challenge with this is our commander himself, or themselves, I should say, because when we tap Calamity of Cinders, or when we tap our commander and any other creatures to Convoke this out, it will untap itself. So not ideal with our commander, but our commander is pretty cheap, even if all we can do is tap our commander to Convoke it and we don't have like a vehicle to re-tap it. That's okay. Sometimes you just need to wipe the board. So those are 3 cards that actually have Convoke. We have 2 other cards in this section that grant Convoke. Chief Engineer is 1 and a blue for a 1/3 Vidalcan Artificer that gives our artifact spells Convoke. We are running 40 artifacts in this deck. Technically 39, and we'll see why that is in a moment, but that's quite a few artifacts that we can Convoke out so that we're able to, again, tap down our commander, tap down our board, and get out bigger things without us having to spend mana for it. This is just a huge amount of acceleration built into the idea of Convoke, and that's just great for us. Being able to look at these as sort of, they're not exactly ramp effects. They're more of a discount effect, but it feels like ramp. It feels like us tapping our creatures for mana. So yeah, Chief Engineer can be very strong in this deck. As can this battle. So Invasion of Segovia is a siege battle. If you haven't seen battles before, very simply, when this comes in, it comes in, sideways like this, with 4 defense counters on it, and we choose one of our opponents to protect it. Then, anyone besides that opponent can attack that battle the same way you would attack a Planeswalker. And that same way, whichever opponent is protecting Invasion of Segovia can use their creatures to block our attackers, or anyone's attackers, the same way they could block someone attacking a Planeswalker they controlled. Pretty simple. Then, each bit of damage that's dealt to Invasion of Segovia takes off one of these defense counters, the same way that loyalty counters come off whenever you do damage to a Planeswalker. And once it's reduced to 0, it will exile itself, and we can cast it right then, instant speed, without paying its mana cost because it doesn't have one. We cast it transformed as Karolus, Sea Tyrant of Segovia. So when Invasion of Segovia comes in for 2 and a blue, it enters and we get 2 1/1 blue Kraken creature tokens with trample. A great nod to Segovia itself, where everything is tiny. So these are 1/1s, but they're Krakens and they have trample. That's very funny. And then on the other side, when it's Karolus, we have a 3/3 legendary serpent that gives all of our non-creature spells Convoke. So this is true for our artifacts as well if we don't have our Chief Engineer in play, but also we have an enchantment, we have another battle, and so forth. Anything that's not a creature has Convoke, and that's pretty sweet, in addition to the fact that while Karolus is in play, at the beginning of our end step, we can untap up to 4 target creatures. This is sweet because it means if our commander if we've used it to Convoke something, let's say, using this ability, then we've tapped them, they've made our 1/1 red human, and then they've untapped themselves because we convoked something, and that's their trigger. Then we tap them to convoke something else, or just tap them to crew a vehicle or something, and they'll be tapped that time, and they'll make us a 1/1 flying blue spirit. That's pretty good too. We go to our end step, we choose our commander to untap, and then after this ability has resolved, it's still our end step.
So we can then crew one of our vehicles right then if we want to with our commander, and that'll let us get to the point where we can make our third, we can have our commander's tap ability resolved for the third time, and we get an angel. That's better. A 4/4 flying angel is better as a blocker, or at least as good, or almost slightly better, in fact, as a crewer or something during later turns than our commander is, our 3/4 commander. So Kaetus sets us up to get to the point where we are able to get those angels out of our commander, which is not something that happens that often in this deck. It's not actually that necessary usually. But when we can get it, we might as well. Kaetus is a great way to do so. In addition to giving all of our non-creature spells Convoke. So that's our Convoke section. I know we talked about this like it's a vehicles deck, so let's look at our vehicles. We have 25 of them. And I know you're thinking, oh, 5 Convoke and 25 vehicles? Well, that's our 30 cards for our game plan. Kind of. We have some more beyond that, which we'll talk about soon. So this is Voyager Glidecar. This is a single white mana for a 2/3 vehicle that crews for 1. And if you haven't seen vehicles before, just a quick reminder or an explanation. This is just an artifact. The power and toughness do not matter until it becomes an artifact creature. Crew means at instant speed, you can tap any number of creatures that have at least a power of its crew number. So in this one just 1. So if you have some 0 power creatures, you can tap them as long as you're also tapping creatures that have at least 1 power. So any number of these. And you can recrew things if you want. Once you crew it, it becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. Nothing else changes about it, it just gains the creature type. It's still a vehicle, or yeah, the creature card type. And therefore it will be a 2/3 vehicle, until end of turn. You can crew something that's already been crewed, it's already become an artifact creature. The only restriction is you cannot use it once it's a creature to crew itself. Because that's silly. They used to be able to do that, not anymore though. Anyway, when the glide car comes in, we scry 1, that's solid. And then it says we can tap 3 other untapped creatures we control, and until end of turn, this vehicle becomes an artifact creature and gains flying, and we put a 1/1 counter on it. So, pretty nice. We can either, for 1 mana, get a scry and get an outlet for basically any creature to tap. And it becomes a 2/3. But if we have 3 creatures, it doesn't matter how much power they have, even if I don't think we have 3 creatures in this deck that have 0 power, but even if we did, even if they all had no power, we could tap 3 creatures, and then this becomes a 3/4, because it gets a counter, and it becomes an artifact creature, just like we had crewed it, even though we didn't crew it, and it gains flying. So this can become a flyer that's bigger if we put multiple creatures into it, rather than just 1 creature to make it normal. Now it keeps that counter, but it doesn't keep flying, because that's just until end of turn. So we can keep making it bigger. We can still use it to tap our things down even when we don't need it to be bigger or don't even need it to be a creature in that moment. So the glide card does a lot for us. Next we have Imposter Mech, which is, I think, the most expensive card in our deck. I'm surprised that it costs so much, but it is a great card. So this is 2 and a blue for a 3/1 vehicle that crews for 3. Notably, we have a number of vehicles that crew for greater than 3. I tried to keep it to mostly 3 or less because 3 is the power of our commander. But luckily our commander is able to crew for more than 3 by simply crewing for 3 or less and making tokens, and we can use those tokens to supplement as well. Anyway, Imposter Mech does crew for 3, which is great because we can have this vehicle enter as a copy of a creature an opponent controls, except it's a vehicle artifact with crew 3 and loses all other card types. So that does mean it loses all creature subtypes as well, since it's not a creature at that moment. But then when we crew it, it gets those subtypes back because it's a creature again. Yeah. Anyway, Imposter Mech lets us take whatever's the scariest on the board and get our own version of it. Even if it's something that's not that scary, maybe it's just a good value piece. Yeah, whatever we may need. And then we are protected from creature removal on it until we crew it ourselves. And if we want to crew it, we can, and we get our tap ability triggers from that. Next is our other battle. This is Evasion of Kaladesh, which did great for me at the pre-release for March of the Machine when I played Izzet with Brutaclad and what are they called? Baral and Karizev, and a bunch of just good times. Just a great pre-release. And this is a great card. For a blue and a red, we get a 4 defense siege that when it enters, we make a 1/1 Thopter artifact creature token with flying. So sweet, we get a token with this. For 2 mana, that's not great for a Thopter, but we do have this siege that we can use for other things. Once it's defeated, it flips into Aetherwing Golden Scale Flagship, a legendary vehicle with flying that crews for 1 and has a toughness of 4 and a power equal to the number of artifacts we control. This can become enormous, and it only takes 1 to crew it, and it flies. Totally great. So it's also notable that this is not a vehicle. This is not an artifact at all. It's a battle. But we are casting this from exile, so this is us casting an artifact, and it is having an artifact enter the play, so that will trigger both of the things that we care about there. If things that care about us casting artifacts or things that care about us having artifacts enter. And just like I mentioned before with the Glide Car, Crew 1 means we can just tap down as many things as we want to and overcrew it to get them tapped. Next we have Mobilizer Mech. This is 1 and a blue for a 3/4 flying vehicle that crews for 3. A little bit of a high crew cost, but a low casting cost and a set of good stats for that casting cost and flying. And it says whenever this vehicle becomes crewed, up to 1 other target vehicle we control becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. So we're crewing 3 on the mech, but it also essentially crews some other vehicle as well. So we can kind of crew 2 things by crewing the mech and something else, which is pretty sweet. We often have enough creatures to crew whatever we need to in this deck, but just in case, the Mobilizer Mech is there to get something off the ground, sometimes literally, even if we are hurting for creatures. Next we have the Bankbuster. I think banned in Standard when it was in Standard. This is the Reckoner Bankbuster is a 4/4 vehicle for 2 that crews for 3, and it enters with 3 charge counters on it. Charge counters, if you haven't seen them, they do show up several different times in this deck. They don't have an inherent mechanical meaning, they're just used by the cards that they're on. So, Reckoner Bankbuster has this ability, pay 2, tap it, and remove a charge counter to draw a card. That's pretty good already, it's just got 3 cards sort of sitting on it for itself for us. And then, once we remove the last one, if there are no charge counters on this vehicle, we make a treasure, and we also make a 1/1 colorless pilot creature token with this token crews vehicles as though its power were 2 greater. So that pilot is just a 1/1 token, but it can still crew the Bankbuster by itself because it crews like its power were 3. That's pretty good. Brotherhood Vertibird, this is from the Fallout decks, is next. 3 generic mana for a vehicle with crew 2 and flying and a power equal to the number of artifacts we control and a toughness of 4. So this is one of our several different cards that cares about the number of artifacts we have, just like our Aetherwing cares about the number of artifacts we have. It's also a star 4 flyer, so 2 is this, so that's pretty good. And crews for 2. Yeah, nice. Cultivator's Caravan is next. This has got to go in any vehicle's deck that's not just colorless, I guess, and probably in even those as well, because it's a Manalith. It's a 3 mana artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color. That's already good on its own. But it's also a vehicle with crew 3 that is a 5/5. So we can use this for both. We pay 3 for it, and we've got a Manalith we can tap for mana, give ourselves a little acceleration. And if we need to crew it, it's got exactly the number we need to tap our commander down. Then we've got a 5/5 we can attack with, or we can block with, since you can crew at instant speed. And we got a token from our commander in the process. Next is Jackdaw. This is from the Assassin's Creed set. For 1, a blue and a red, we get a 4/4 legendary vehicle for 3, that crews for 3. And it says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we may discard our hand, and if we do, we draw a card for each artifact we control. Now, we don't have that much recursion in this deck, but sometimes, if our hand is just full of lands, or if we just don't have much in our hand at all, even if we have an empty hand, we can still discard it, and probably draw more cards. It's pretty red to be able to just rummage away our whole hand and get more cards into play, or into our hand than we had, so we might as well do it. Yeah, Jackdaw is good for that, and even if we don't want to do all this, well, we just don't attack with it. we can just use it to tap our commander, either on our turn or on an opponent's turn if we want to tap our commander and also block with it. Yeah, either way, good for us for 3 mana. Next is Mobile Garrison. 3 generic mana for a 3/4 vehicle that says whenever it attacks, we untap another target artifact or creature we control. This is another great way. We can sort of treat it like, oh no, so it has crew for 2. We can kind of treat it like Convoke, because we tap our commander to crew this, we attack with it, we untap our commander, and now we can tap our commander again, at the very least, to recrew the garrison, even before blocks are declared. Or we can tap our commander for any other reason, and now we've gotten both our human token and our spirit token from our commander for that turn. Pretty good. We can also untap other things if we want, artifacts, creatures, if whatever we need. Being able to untap our Cultivator's Caravan is pretty nice. We can just get more mana out of it without having to spend any mana to get to that point. You know, lots of different ways we can be useful here. And a 3/4, cruise for 2, pretty solid. Next is Prodigy's Prototype. 1, a white, and a blue for a 3/4 vehicle that says whenever one or more vehicles we control attack, create one of those pilots. It's a 1/1 that crews vehicles as though its power were 2 or greater. Pretty good. These are the Kamigawa pilot tokens. They're pretty sweet. This crews for 2, so we can use this to, whenever we attack with any of our vehicles, we get a token as well. So that's something we're going to want to do anyway. Thopter Fabricator is next. This is 2 and a blue for a 4/4 vehicle that crews for 2. It flies, 4/4 flyer for 3, that also makes a 1/1 Thopter with flying every time we draw our second card each turn. And we have a number of ways in our card advantage suite to get additional draw every turn, rather than just casting a spell and drawing extra cards that turn. We have repeatable card advantage spells or effects. So Thopter Fabricator can also fill up our skies with little friends. That sounds good too. Mu Yanling Windrider from Aetherdrift. This is the desparked Mu Yanling. Really cool. She's 2 and double blue for a legendary human wizard pilot. Oh, she's a pilot. Who's a 2/4. When she enters, we make a 3/2 colorless vehicle artifact token with crew 1. This is the only vehicle token that we have in this deck. But it's pretty sweet. We just get a 2/4 and a 3/2, which is like a 5/6 all in, even though that's not really how that works. But one of the reasons she's here is because vehicles we control have flying. We already have several vehicles that have flying. Now all of our vehicles do, including her little token that she makes. And it crews for 1, so that's very solid. This is why this is in this section, because it makes a vehicle, even though she herself is not one. And whenever one or more creatures we control with flying deal combat damage to a player, we draw a card. We have a number of creatures that fly, but we have a lot of vehicles that fly, and when Mu is in play, they all do. So lots of ways to draw cards. Now it does say 1 or more creatures. So if we attack one of our opponents with a bunch of vehicles, or a bunch of our flying creatures, doesn't matter how many hit, we're only going to draw the 1 card. But if we split up our attacks between players, it says a player. So if we have at least 1 creature hit multiple players, Mu will trigger once for each of those players that was hit, and we could draw multiple cards. Still pretty nice. Next up is Surge Hacker Mech, something that's got to go in, I believe, any vehicles deck. For 4 generic mana, we get a 5/5 vehicle that crews for 4. It has Menace, and when it enters, it deals damage equal to twice the number of vehicles we control to target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. So at the very least, this is a shock built into a 4/4 or a 5/5 Menace that crews for 4. Pretty good. Next is the Belligerent. This is 2, a blue and a red for a 5/5 legendary vehicle that crews for 3. The Belligerent is Vraska's ship from Ixalan. It's also the name of the ship of Vraska and Jace, so there you go. It says, when the Belligerent attacks, we make a treasure token. It's just on attack, doesn't have to hit. We just make a treasure token. And then, until end of turn, we can look at the top card of our library at any time, and we can play lands and cast spells from the top of our library. We do not have to use the treasure token to do so. The Belligerent doesn't even have to survive combat for us to have that effect. We hope it does, and it's a 5/5, so it likely will. But pretty sweet. The Indomitable is next. Also a great ship. This is Admiral Beckett Brass's ship. 2 and double blue for a 6/6 legendary vehicle with trample and crews for 3. And whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, we draw a card. So just Coastal Piracy, right there. In addition, we can cast the Indomitable from our graveyard as long as we control 3 or more tapped pirates and or vehicles. So, as long as we've got enough vehicles, we can get the Indomitable back from our graveyard, so we have no reason not to attack with it, and hopefully trample over and do a little bit of damage with it, so we can draw ourselves a card. The Regalia is next. This is from Final Fantasy. 4 generic mana for a nice car. It's a 4/4 legendary vehicle with crew 1 and haste, so we can attack with this right away. It says whenever it attacks, again, doesn't have to do damage, just has to attack, we reveal cards from the top of our library until we reveal a land card. We put that onto the battlefield tapped, and the rest on the bottom in a random order. So this gives us, it's not exactly rampant growth, but it can hit our dual lands and our non-basics. So we just sort of cascade into a land, if you want to think of it that way, whenever this attacks. That's pretty solid. A good way for us to get a little bit of acceleration as soon as we get out the Regalia. Knight Paladin from Warhammer 40k is next. 5 generic mana for a 6/6 trampling vehicle that crews for 1. Crew 1 for a 6/6 trample is very nice. It also has a rapid fire battle cannon, which is to say when it enters, it deals 4 damage to each opponent. That's just straight burn. That's 10% of everyone's starting life total right away. We're doing 12 damage, assuming 3 opponents, the moment this comes in for 5 generic mana, and it leaves behind a 6/6 trampling vehicle that crews for only 1. This is a great card. Mysterious Limousine is a little bit of a pet card for me, but also a solid one. This is 3 and double white for a 4/4 vehicle that crews for 2. That says whenever it enters or attacks, we exile up to 1 other target creature until this leaves the battlefield. If a creature is put into exile this way, return each other card exiled with this vehicle to the battlefield under its owner's control. The idea is this is a Banishing Light, or an Oblivion Ring, whatever you want to call it, for a creature when it enters. At that point, we never need to attack with this. We can just have that creature exiled under the Limousine forever if we want. But if we do attack with it, and there's a creature underneath it, the creature that's exiled with it comes back, and we can exile a different creature, because the Limousine only carries 1 person at a time, is the idea. Obviously, it could carry multiple people in a different deck that has something like Panharmonicon, or if it's like an Ishan deck or something. But in this deck, the Limousine comes in, exiles something, and if we attack with it, that something, if it's still there, will get out of the Limousine, and something else will get in the opposite door. The way I normally play this card is, if I can, obviously you want to get the biggest, scariest thing off the battlefield, the thing that's most detrimental to our game plan. But if it's up in the air, exile someone's commander, because then they're likely to take that commander and put it in the command zone, which allows us to attack with the Limousine, and nothing's leaving the car. We just put something new into it, which gives us the ability to swing in a way that is a little bit more evasive, because whatever would have blocked, the worst blocker is now out of our way. So yeah, I really like the Limousine in this deck. Salvation Engine is next. This is 4 and a white for a 6/10 vehicle, but it does crew for 6, so not something we do right away. However, whether or not we've crewed it, other artifact creatures we control get +2/+2. Now that means once we crew a vehicle, it becomes an artifact creature, so that suddenly that +2/+2 starts to affect it. It also works for any of our creatures that are just artifact creatures, like our Thopters. They become 3/3s in the air. That's pretty solid. And whenever this vehicle attacks, return up to 1 target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield. With the Salvation Engine in play, we don't have to worry about swinging in with our vehicles, because if they die, next turn we just attack with the Salvation Engine and get it back. Pretty great. Sky Sovereign, console flagship, is next. Hate the console, love the Sky Sovereign. 5 generic mana for a 6/5 legendary vehicle with flying and crew 3. And whenever it enters or attacks, it deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. There you go. Just lightning bolt a creature or planeswalker every time it attacks. Every time it just, even when it enters. It comes in, bolts something, and leaves behind a vehicle that we can crew with our commander right away. That's a 6/5 flyer. We can do this to block, to surprise someone, and not only can we block with this, we also get that 1/1 token that our commander would make in the process. Pretty sweet. Love Sky Sovereign. Next we have a Doctor Who card. It's Cybership. 6 generic mana for an 8/8 flying vehicle with crew 4. So not quite within the reach of our commander. At least not without help, but still, an 8/8 flyer is crazy. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we put the top 2 cards of that player's library onto the battlefield face down under our control, and they are 2/2 Cyberman artifact creatures. So I do have this tagged later on in the deck as a token generator. It's not actually making tokens. Those cards are cards. They're just face down, and they count as 2/2 artifact creatures that are called Cyberman. But it's performing a function that's similar to making tokens, in that it's creating creatures for us that just exist for us to use to attack or block or crew our other things. So it's similar to tokens, but it also does steal a couple things off of a player's library. So if we have an opponent that is scrying things to the top, surveilling things to the top, able to cast things off the top of their library, and they're leaving those things there to do so, or if they're putting things back on top of their library with something like a witch's cottage, like Cybership can kind of hose them as well if they let it do damage to them. So yeah, 8/8 flyer that makes essentially 2 2/2s every time it hits. Pretty good. Next is the Pridwin from the Pridwin Steel Flagship, also from the Fallout Commander decks. If this is not pronounced Pridwin, let me know in the comments below. I believe it is. I've heard it pronounced that way, but yeah, big skyship. 4 and double white for a 6/6 legendary vehicle with crew 2 and flying. That says whenever another non-token artifact we control enters, create a 2/2 white human knight creature token with this token gets +2/+2 as long as an artifact entered the battlefield under your control this turn. So we just have one of our artifacts enter, isn't a token, and we get a 2/2 with it, and that 2/2 can become a 4/4 during each turn we've had an artifact enter before we need it to be a 4/4. It doesn't keep getting 2/2s because it's not when an artifact enters, this creature gets +2/+2. It gets +2/+2 as long as an artifact is entered, not as long as one artifact is entered, or for each artifact that enters. It's asking a yes/no question. Did an artifact enter this turn? Yes, then it gets +2/+2. Did 3 of them? Then it's the same yes. It's still an artifact did. So yeah, we get some 2/2s that can become 4/4s. That's pretty good. Next is Rolling Hamsphere from the Bloomborough Commander decks. This is 7 generic mana, so pretty expensive for a 4/4 vehicle with crew 3. Can be crewed by our commander. But it gets +1/+1 for each hamster we control. Well, we don't have any hamsters in this deck. But whenever it attacks, we make 3 1/1 red hamster creature tokens, and then the Hamsphere deals X damage to any target, where X is the number of hamsters we control. Now the Hamsphere itself is not a hamster. But if it makes 3 red hamsters, then suddenly it attacks, and it's attacking as a 7/7 because we've now got 3 hamsters. And it also lightning bolts something, just 3 damage to any target the first time we attack with it. And if we keep all those hamsters and the Hamsphere, the next turn we can crew it with just those hamsters if we want. It'll attack, it'll make 3 more hamsters, and now it's a 10/10 that's doing 6 damage, 6 damage to any target, since that's the number of hamsters we have. This just gets bigger and bigger. It's sort of a mere battle sphere, but much cuter, I guess. So yeah. Valor's Flagship is next. This is from Aetherdrift. It's 4 and triple white for a 7/7 legendary vehicle with crew 3 and flying, first strike, and lifelink. Pretty great, just a huge monstrosity. It does first strike for some reason. It's a 7/7. I don't know if it really needs it, but who knows? Maybe they've got 2 angels or something. It flies and it has lifelink. Lifelink is great for a 7/7 that we can crew with our commander. It also has cycling for X, 2, and a white, meaning we can cycle it for just 2 and a white. And so when it's in our hand, we pay the 2 and a white, discard it, and we draw a card. If we get this early on and we just don't need it, we'll throw it away, and hopefully we get our Salvation Engine and we can bring it back. But if we can pump more mana into it with the X, that's great, because when we cycle it, we make a number of 1/1 colorless pilot creature tokens that saddle mounts and crew vehicles as though their power were 2 or greater, equal to the X. So these are the Aetherdrift tokens. Just so you know, if you only have the Kamigawa tokens, the ones that say they crew vehicles as though their power were 2 greater, but don't mention anything about mounts, that's fine. We don't have any mounts in this deck. The Kamigawa ones are the same functionally for this deck as these Ether Drift ones. But if you get the Ether Drift ones, those are also fine, since, I don't know, an opponent might steal your tokens and have them out. You never know. So, Valor's Flagship, being able to turn into a extra card if we need it, an extra card plus a bunch of tokens if we need it, or just being a huge monstrosity, that seems great. But for a little bit more mana, we get the best flying vehicle, which is Parhelion 2. 6 and double white for a 5/5 legendary vehicle that crews for 4 and has flying, first strike, and vigilance, similar to the Valor's Flagship, but it has vigilance instead of lifelink. Pretty good. And it says whenever it attacks, we make 2 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance that are attacking. They have vigilance, which is why they're created, and it does not say that they are tapped and attacking. They're just untapped. So we can attack with the Parhelion 2, get those angels, they're attacking, and whether or not we want them to do their damage, we can just tap them to activate other things if we want to crew other creatures, or other vehicles rather, to post-combat station our spacecraft, whatever we need. Sweet. That is our vehicle section. I just mentioned Spacecraft, so let's talk about them. We've got a few of them. In Spirit, Flagship Vessel is the first one. This is Jeskai mana, blue, red, and white, for a 5/5 legendary Spacecraft, but we don't care about the 5/5 yet. Because if you haven't seen Spacecraft, here's the way they work. This is just an artifact, a Spacecraft, that has a station ability. It doesn't do anything. This card doesn't do anything until it's been stationed sufficiently. Stationing is something you do at sorcery speed. You tap a creature, much the way you would with crewing, but it doesn't have a station number the way that crew has a number next to it. So you can tap any creature you want, at sorcery speed, of course. Each time you do, you put a number of charge counters on in Spirit equal to the power of the creature you used to station it. And then it gains abilities as it gets more charge counters on it. So if you station it with any creature that has at least 1 power, it's going to get its first ability, since it'll have 1 or more charge counters on it. That ability is, at the beginning of combat on our turn, we can put our choice of a +1/+1 counter or 2 charge counters on up to 1 other target artifact. So we can put charge counters on our other Spacecraft, or on that one vehicle that uses charge counters. It was charge counters on a vehicle. I know we saw it a bit ago. Oh yeah, Reckoner Bankbuster. If we want to add more counters to it so that we're able to draw more cards before or even after, I suppose, we make our token and our pilot token and our treasure token, then that's pretty sweet. We can also use in Spirit, wrong section. There we go. We can also use in Spirit to put +1/+1 counters on artifacts, which is relevant for both our Spacecraft, once they are stationed up to the point that they are a creature, or our artifact creatures, or just our vehicles that don't care about the 1/1 counters they have on them until they are crewed, at which point they do. They're just a bigger vehicle. So in Spirit can really supplement the things that we're doing in this. It just can't put these counters on itself. And once we station it up to at least 8 charge counters, it becomes a 5/5 flyer that gives all other artifacts we control hexproof and indestructible. So this is very strong for us. And a 5/5 flyer that has this trigger still, it's pretty good. It's just worth noting that when you station this, it's not a creature until it's up to 8. And if we don't station it at all, it's just sitting there being an artifact and doing nothing for us. So we want to be able to tap our commander at the very least to do this right away. If we've already tapped our commander for something, we've probably got at least one of our 1/1 tokens in, which is good because it only takes 1 charge counter to activate this first ability. Pretty good for in Spirit. Next is Uthros Research Craft. 2 and a blue for a 0/8 Spacecraft, of course with station. Doesn't do anything for us until it's been stationed, up to 3 charge counters. Once it has at least 3, it has this ability. Whenever we cast an artifact spell, we draw a card and we put a charge counter on the Research Craft. Very, very strong. Just every time we cast another artifact, we draw a card, it replaces itself, and this gets a counter on it. We might just station this with our commander immediately to get that online, and then never station this again unless we really need to, because we might have better things to use to tap our commander. If we don't, we can of course keep doing that, but we just keep casting artifact spells, and eventually this is going to get up to 12 or more counters, at which point it becomes a 0/8 flyer that gets +1/+0 for each artifact we control. So it's sort of like a bigger vertibird, same text for the power, but twice as much toughness. Seems good. Last, this is... I went back and forth about putting this in the deck, but it's just really fun. The Eternity Elevator is a legendary spacecraft for 5 generic mana that has an ability even before it's stationed. It taps for 3 colorless mana. This is sort of like a Thrawn Dynamo for us. Pretty good. We can also station it, of course, but it doesn't do anything with these charge counters until we have at least 20 on it. But maybe eventually we'll get there. And once it does, we have the ability to tap it to add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of charge counters on it. So this is sort of just a Thrawn Dynamo. It's just sort of a ramp piece. But eventually, it becomes so much more. It lets us cast our whole hand, basically. So yeah, really exciting as a way for us to tap our things down, particularly our commander, and to accelerate ourselves in the process until we can really accelerate ourselves. So the Eternity Elevator, very nice. The one thing it is not is a creature once it becomes crewed this high. So something to think about there. That is our Spacecraft section. We have a section that is just tappers. Things that let us tap our creatures without using them for crew and what have you. We've already seen the Glide Car. It does have a crew ability, but we can also just tap 3 untapped creatures we control to make it an artifact creature, give it flying, and put a counter on it. So that's pretty nice as another option for us. We're running Relic of Legends as well, which is a Manalith, a 3-mana artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color, but it also lets us tap an untapped legendary creature we control to add 1 mana of any color. This doesn't require us to tap the Relic, so if we wanted to, we can just tap our commander and make a mana, and use that for nothing. Don't even spend the mana on something, but at least we've tapped our commander, since they are legendary. We also have a number of other legendary creatures and legendary artifacts, which can become creatures. And once they become creatures, Relic of Legends can let us tap them to add a mana of any color. So this is a really cool acceleration piece, as well as a tap outlet for just any of our legendary creatures, especially our commander. Nice. Last in this section is Thousand Moons Smithy. 2 and double white, what am I saying? For a legendary artifact. It says when it enters, we make a white gnome soldier artifact creature token. Good grief. With this token's power and toughness are each equal to the number of artifacts and or creatures you control. We have an enormous number of artifacts in this deck, and we have a huge number of tokens that are creatures. So Thousand Moon Smithy makes us a gnome soldier, one of these cute little guys, that is just huge. And at the beginning of our first main phase, we may tap 5 untapped artifacts and or creatures that we control. If we do, we transform this. So I want to take note of this. This only happens sort of during our saga step. After we draw our card for turn, start of our first main phase, if we have 5 creatures and or artifacts that we're willing to tap down, like vehicles we're not planning to use to attack and block with until our next turn, our commander, any of our many tokens that we will be making, we tap down 5 of those, and we transform the Thousand Moon Smithy. We can tap the Smithy itself. It is an artifact. But if we do, when it transforms, it will remain tapped. So let's assume we didn't tap the Smithy. We transform it, and it becomes the Barracks of the Thousand, which is a legendary artifact land. This is the reason we might not have wanted to tap the Smithy itself to its ability, because it's a land that taps for white. That's pretty good. We can tap it for white right away. So this sort of accelerates us by just doing this tap ability. This only happens once, obviously, but then we've got a little bit of mana. Also notable, this is an artifact, so we can still tap artifacts or count this toward our artifact count if we need it for something that cares about the number of artifacts we have. In addition, it says whenever we cast an artifact or creature spell using mana produced by this land, we make one of those gnome soldiers with power and toughness each equal to the number of artifacts and our creatures we control. So we get one of these cute gnomes when it first comes in, and once we flip it, every time we use its mana for a spell for creatures or artifact, a spell that's a creature or an artifact, we get another one of them. And they just keep getting bigger and bigger because, of course, they count themselves since they are artifact and creatures. So yeah, Thousand Moon Smithy, a great way for us to produce more tokens the tokens get really big, especially in this deck, and we can make more and more of them while also accelerating ourselves by getting a way to tap our things. Sweet. That is our tapper section, and those are the, I believe, 35 different ways we can tap down our commander. So yeah, that's not the end of our game plan though, because I mentioned this is a tokens deck. Tokens, there we go. So here are many things we've already seen, but some of which we haven't, ways that we can make tokens in this deck. Idol of Oblivion is first. It's not a great example of it though, but it's an important card in this deck for another reason. That is that it's a 2-mana artifact that we can tap to draw a card, but only if we've created a token this turn. This is almost every turn in our deck, at least after the first few. So being able to get a free card every turn, in addition to already getting the value from having a token, is very good for just 2 mana. And we can, if at some point we need to, pay 8 mana, tap and sacrifice the idol to make a 10/10 colorless Eldrazi creature token. We're probably not going to do this in this deck, but you never know. Sometimes we might have a whole bunch of mana or ways to tap our creatures for mana to supplement it, and maybe we just need something really big. That's okay to have. Most of the time, though, we're using this just to draw cards. We've seen Evasion of Kaladesh. It enters and it makes us a Thopter. Reckoner Bankbuster, once we've taken all the charge counters off of it, or the last one we take off of it, will not just draw us a card, it'll make us a treasure and a Kamigawa Pilot token. Staff of the Storyteller is 1 and a white for an artifact that when it enters, it makes a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. It's exactly the same as the spirit that our commander makes, except it's white instead of blue. And it says whenever we create 1 or more tokens, creature tokens, we put a story counter on this artifact. Story counters are just used by Staff of the Storyteller. They don't have an inherent mechanical meaning. But this ability is triggered by this spirit that comes in. So it'll come in, make a spirit, and immediately put a story counter on itself. Then we can pay a white and tap it and remove a story counter from it to draw a card. So for 2 mana, we get a spirit and the ability to tap it to draw cards, but we do have to pay mana for it. So similar to Idol of Oblivion, but it gives us the token right away, but we don't get to tap it for free. So yeah, either way. But we can build up these counters and use them later on turns that we didn't even make a token, so that's a possibility too. Both are solid for our deck. Next, we have Third Path Iconoclast from the Brothers' War. A blue and a red for a 2/1 human monk that says whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we make a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. So not only is this a token that we can use to tap to crew our vehicles or whatever else we may need to do, it is an artifact creature. So this is counted whenever we have one of our effects that counts the artifacts that we have on the board. This is not us casting an artifact spell, however, so it won't trigger anything that cares about that. But I should note, non-creature spell. Well, only 15 spells in this deck, including our commander, are creatures. And the Third Path Iconoclast is another one, so pretty sweet. Halo Fountain is next. I love this card from Streets of New Capenna. 2 and a white for an artifact with 3 abilities. If we pay a white and tap it and untap a target tapped creature we control, or just a tap, it doesn't target, then we make a 1/1 green and white citizens creature token. So we tap our commander to crew a vehicle. We get a human token. We pay a white and tap the Halo Fountain to untap our commander, and we make a green and white citizen. Then we tap our commander to crew that same vehicle again if we need to, or something else, obviously, and we get our 1/1 blue spirit creature token with flying. So with the Halo Fountain and our commander in play, we spent 1 white mana, and we made 3 1/1s. That's crazy. Using this to untap our commander, among any other thing, is a great way for us to upgrade our commander's tokens throughout the turn. Halo Fountain, we can also pay double white and tap and untap 2 tapped creatures we control to draw a card. So great way for us to get some more card advantage and to, of course, untap our commander and anything else we need to untap to crew other things. Or we can pay 5 white, tap it, and untap 15 tapped creatures we control. But if we do, we win the game. The game's just over at that point. This is sweet because it allows us to do things like tapping our creatures to crew our vehicles, and then tapping our vehicles to crew each other. We can't use them to crew themselves, obviously, but we can tap them to crew other vehicles and over crew them if we need to just get lots and lots of things crewed. And that means that we don't have to actually even have 15 creatures in play to be able to use this ability. We just need to end up with 15 permanents that are tapped that are then creatures, because vehicles don't start as creatures, but once they're crewed, they become them. So yeah, Halo Fountain, 5 white is a lot, but it is our most populous color, so we've got the most white production in our mana base for it. This is definitely a possibility. And even if all we're doing is untapping our commander to make an extra token, or untapping our commander and some other creature, maybe a token, to draw a card each turn, this is just free value every turn, it feels like. This feels a lot like Staff of the Storyteller to me. Even though it doesn't give us a card, it gives us another token. And then that token could be usable the next turn to give us a card. Yeah, very nice. We've seen Evasion of Segovia. It comes in and makes those 2/1/1 blue Krakens with Trample. Next we have Monastery Mentor, another card that really helps us with our non-creature spells. 2 and a white for a 2/2 human monk with Prowess, meaning whenever we cast a non-creature spell, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn, so it gets bigger. And whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we make a 1/1 monk creature token with Prowess. So similar to our Third Path Iconoclast for 2, making us 1/1s, but they are artifacts. That's pretty nice. The Monastery Mentor costs 1 more, but the 1/1s it makes have Prowess without being artifact creatures, and it has Prowess as well, so we can just keep getting more and more and more creature spells out. This is terrific in a Convoke deck. And of course a artifacts deck like what we have. So Prodigy's Prototype, we've already seen. Whenever one or more vehicles we control attack, we make a Kamigawa Pilot. Thopter Fabricator, when we draw our second card each turn, we make a 1/1 Thopter. Wildfire Awakener, when it enters, hopefully we've convoked it as hard as we can, because it makes a whole bunch of little 1/1 red elementals that when they tap for damage. They tap to ping players. Kaikar Wind's Fury is next. This is 1 and Jeskai, 1 a blue, a red, and a white, for a 3/3 flying legendary bird wizard. It's a bird that's a wizard. It says whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we make a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. Pretty sweet. And we can sacrifice a spirit to add a red mana to our pool. Red, our least used color, but therefore the least represented in our mana pool, so we might need this red. It might be worth sacrificing a spirit, many of which we may have made with Kaikar itself, or with our commander, or we could even sacrifice our commander themselves. Probably don't want to, but if we need the mana that badly, it's nice to have an option since our commander is a human spirit. Yeah, Kaikar very nice as a way of giving us flyers that we can use for multiple things. Next is Outlaw's Merriment, one of probably my favorite cards in Magic. I truly love this card from Throne of Eldraine. This is 1 a red and double white for an enchantment that says at the beginning of our upkeep, we choose one of the following at random, and then we create a red and white creature token with those characteristics. We either get a 3/1 human warrior with trample and haste, a 2/1 human cleric with lifelink and haste, or a 1/2 rogue, human rogue, with haste, and when this token enters, it deals 1 damage to any target. So this is a free extra token every turn for 4 mana. We don't get to decide which one we want, but it could be a 3/1, which is the same when it comes to crewing as the Kamigawa Pilots, and it has trample in case we need that. A 2/1 that has lifelink, and all of these have haste, of course. Or a 1/2, which isn't doing that much to help us, but it is better than the tokens that our commander makes, the human tokens, since this is a 1/2 versus a 1/1, and when it enters, it just pings something. We could kill an opponent's X1. We can maybe kill a planeswalker with it. Or at least we just burn someone's face. Pretty great. Sammy Ship's Engineer is next. 2 and a red and a white for a 2/4 legendary human artificer that says at the beginning of your end step, if you control 2 or more tapped creatures, create a tapped 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token. So the fact that it comes in tapped is unfortunate, but we get a cute robot. It's great. We get a free robot, a free extra token, as long as we have 2 or more tapped creatures. How might we have 2 or more tapped creatures? Maybe we've crewed a vehicle with our commander and then attacked with that vehicle. We've still got an untapped creature in play, which is Sammy, and an untapped new creature, which is that 1/1 red human from our commander being tapped. So we went from having 3 creatures in play to having 5 creatures in play by the end of it. Of course, one of them stops being a creature at the end of turn since it's a vehicle, but yeah. Sammy making us more tokens. They are 2/2s, and even though they're tapped, they are artifact creatures, so that can really be helpful to us. Thanks, Sammy. Thousand Moon Smithy, we've already seen. It makes these crazy gnome soldiers, both on the front and on the back. Cybership doesn't actually make tokens, but it kind of gives us the equivalent, which is these 2/2 artifact creature Cybermen from the cards in our opponent's deck. The Pridwin, when another non-token artifact we control enters, we make one of these 2/2 white human knights that can get bigger whenever we have artifacts having entered. And we've seen the rest of these as well. Rolling Hamsphere makes 3 hamsters when it enters. Valor's Flagship, it doesn't make any tokens on its own, but we can cycle it, and whatever we pump into the X, we make that many Ether Drift pilot tokens. And Parhelion 2, when it attacks, we get 2 4/4 flying vigilant angels, so 2 Sarah angels that are attacking. Pretty sweet. And that's a lot of cards, and that is our game plan. Oh hey, did you just tap that like button? Thanks. I'm just kidding. You don't have to like the video if you don't want to. I'm grateful that you're here either way. Anyway, there's more where all of this came from. So before we get into the supplemental sections of it, let's talk now about our support categories, these ways that we can eat our vegetables. Starting with our card advantage section, which as usual, I just tag as draw just to make it a nice shorthand. It doesn't mean all these cards do the draw a card action. It just means this gives us access to more cards. So Idol of Oblivion does draw us a card when we tap it if we've made a token during that turn. Reckoner Bankbuster, we can pay 2 and tap and remove a charge counter from it to draw a card if it has any charge counters left on it. Staff of the Storyteller, similarly, we can pay 1, tap it, and remove a story counter from it to draw a card. Halo Fountain lets us pay 1, tap, and pay 2 white, tap, and untap 2 tapped creatures to draw a card. The Jackdaw lets us discard our hand when it does combat damage to a player, and then draw a card for each artifact we control. Pretty good. Lornan of the Third Path is my favorite Reclamation Sage. 2 and a white for a 2/1 legendary human artificer with vigilance that when she enters, she disenchants. She destroys an artifact or an enchantment. Pretty great. We can also tap her, and then we and an opponent each draw a card. Sometimes we can use this politically. We can say, hey look, I'd like to draw a card. I would like to let you draw a card as well. What will you give me for it? Will you just leave me alone for this next turn? I don't have to choose you. I don't even have to activate this at all. But most people in a commander game are probably going to say, yeah, let me draw a card. I wasn't planning to attack you anyway. And then we've got a little promise from them and we get a card. Seems good. Next up is Rumor Gatherer. I really like this card. Streets of New Capenna did so great for us. Look at this elephant with a little note, and this giraffe with a note, and this bear with a briefcase. Crazy. This is 1 and double white for a 2/1 elf wizard with an alliance ability. Whenever another creature we control enters, we scry 1. And if this is the second time this ability is resolved this turn, instead, we draw a card. Meaning, whenever we have a creature come in, we scry 1. Except for the second time. The second time, we draw a card. The third time, we scry. The fourth time, we scry. Every time it happens, we scry, except for the second time during a turn, which is a draw. A lot of easy ways for us to draw cards in this deck if we're getting our token production online. Even if not, getting a nice scry is pretty great. I will mention, though, if you play a vehicle, this is not going to trigger at all, because vehicles aren't creatures entering. Even if it enters and we immediately crew it, it didn't enter as a creature. It entered as an artifact and then became a creature. So Rumor Gatherer won't trigger off of our vehicles. Next up is the Uthros Research Craft. It lets us draw a card every time we cast an artifact spell. Welcoming Vampire is next. Another nice little 3-drop white creature that gives us card draw. 2 and a white for a 2/3 Vampire with flying. That says whenever 1 or more creatures we control with power 2 or less enter, we draw a card, but only once each turn. So this works with so many of our tokens. This is probably going to be drawing us a card each turn, much like Staff of the Storyteller and our Idol of Oblivion. And it's a flyer, which could be relevant for one of our things that cares about flyers, like Mu Yanling. Speaking of Mu Yanling, it gives us Coastal Piracy, or Reconnaissance Mission, Curiosity really, for each of our flyers, except it's 1 or more, so not quite Coastal Piracy. Still, whenever we have a flyer deal combat damage, we draw a card. That could include the Welcoming Vampire. Pretty good. The Belligerent, when it attacks, we get a treasure token, and until end of turn, we can play a land or cast a spell from the top of our library, or lands and spells from the top of our library, I should say, which gives us access to at least 1 extra card that wasn't in our hand, so that's card advantage. The Indomitable actually has Coastal Piracy attached to it, so whenever a creature we control deals common damage to a player, we draw a card. And of course, Valor's Flagship, we can cycle, which would put a new card in our hand. It's not card advantage since we're losing the Flagship, but since we can cycle the Flagship and get an effect out of it, it's sort of like us casting a spell that is a cantrip. So yeah, that is our card advantage section. Let's talk about Acceleration, which again I've just shorthanded as ramp with this tag. Obviously, we're running Soul Ring, 1 generic mana for an artifact that taps for 2 colorless. It's so powerful. We have some expensive stuff in this deck. Even if we didn't, it accelerates us like crazy. I recommend anyone who cares about EDH Rec to go watch Joey talk about how powerful Soul Ring is and how statistically significant it is for one player at the table to have a Soul Ring start and how likely it is for that player to win. Yeah, Soul Ring, put it in your deck. Wayfarer's Bauble is next. We're not in green, so we need a Rampant Growth. 1 generic mana for an artifact that is an artifact. We don't have to crack it because it can help our artifact count. But if we want, and we usually do, we pay 2, tap, and sack it to Rampant Growth. Search our library for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Great way for us to find our 3rd color if we're looking for it, or just give ourselves a little acceleration. Arcane Signet, it's our best mana rock. It's a 2 generic cost artifact that comes in untapped and taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, which is in this deck is white, blue, or red. Terrific. Untapped rock makes all of our colors. We want this. Felwar Stone is next. It's another untapped 2 mana rock, but it makes it 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. So it's possible that our opponents might be playing only black, green, and or colorless. In which case, the Felwar Stone is an untapped rock that produces colorless mana for us, or produces mana we can use for generic costs. That's still great. But if we have another opponent who's playing white, not unlikely in Commander, or white or blue or red, whatever it may be, we can make those colors as well. If we see all of our colors in our opponent's lands, then this is just another Arcane Signet for us. And if an opponent has something like a Chromatic Lantern, which makes it so any of their lands can tap for any color, the Felwar Stone knows that, so now it can tap for any color as well. So it makes our colors. The same is true of something like an Exotic Orchard. If an opponent has Exotic Orchard or their own Felwar, or I guess Exotic Orchard is the best example because it has the same text, then that Orchard now taps for any color that our lands could produce. So the Felwar Stone taps for any color that our lands can produce through that Exotic Orchard. You see, very strong mana rock for its cost. Liquimetal Torque is next. This is a little expensive for a mana rock that only makes colorless for 2 mana, but it does come in untapped rather. It, of course, is an artifact. And it does something great in our deck which cares so much about other artifacts. We can tap it and target non-land permanent becomes an artifact in addition to its other types until end of turn. So we can tap this and make our commander into an artifact so that one of our ways of making our artifacts have hexproof and or indestructible now affects our commander. It's a protection for our commander. We could have this make our commander or a token or even one of our lands. I'm sorry, not our lands. Even our enchantment, our Outlaw's Merriment into an extra artifact if we need that for our artifact count for something. Maybe our Vertibird needs 1 extra point of damage. When we're attacking with it, we just tap the Liquimetal Torque and make something that's not an artifact into an artifact until end of turn. Great. It's also a possibility that we could use this aggressively or politically, because it doesn't say non-land permanent you control. So we can hit something on our opponent's board and maybe do something like, I don't know, if somebody has a 0-cost creature. No, this isn't going to work. Never mind. But anyway, someone might say, "Oh, I have something that cares about the number of artifacts I have too. Will you activate your Liquimetal Torque to make one of my non-artifacts into an artifact?" And we'll say, "Sure. What will you give me for it?" You know, it's an option. We've seen the Bankbuster. It can eventually make us a treasure token. That's a little bit of acceleration. After that, we have our 3 talismans: Conviction, Creativity, and Progress in our colors. The way these work is they are all 2 mana rocks that tap for a colorless, or for 1 or 2 colors if we're willing to let it do a damage to us if it makes the colored mana. This is a terrific deal, because if we don't need it to make colored mana, well, we just use it for the colorless mana. But if we need the colored mana, The fact that we need the colored mana means we are 1 mana away from being able to cast a spell. Would you spend 1 life to be able to cast a spell that you otherwise wouldn't be able to cast? I sure would. So Talisman of Progress, or the other talismans, all give us the ability to fix our mana for a very low cost, or if we don't need to, it's just a 2 mana untapped rock. That is Felrow Stone at its worst case, or Liquid Metal Torque with its first ability. Very strong. We've seen Cultivator's Caravan. It's a vehicle that can also tap for 1 mana of any color as a manalith. Relic of Legends is another manalith, but also lets us tap our legendary creatures for mana. Creatures like Kaikar, who lets us sacrifice our spirits to add red mana. The Belligerent, when it attacks, makes a treasure token, but also lets us play lands off the top of our library, which isn't acceleration unless we didn't have any lands in hand. So it's sort of like us drawing a card and playing it right away, which is Growth Spiral. So the Regalia, when it attacks, we just get the top land in our library onto the battlefield tapped. Pretty good. Thousand Moon Smithy is not necessarily acceleration, but it can be if we activate its tap ability during our pre-combat main phase without tapping it, because then it flips into a land we can tap right away. Pretty good. And the Eternity Elevator is it's a Thran Dynamo. You know, it makes 3 colorless for us. It's strong, and also eventually it might make more than 20 mana every time we tap it, or 20 or more. So yeah, very silly, but I love the Eternity Elevator. So that is our acceleration section. We have some acceleration, or not acceleration, goodness, some interaction. Of course, we're a red deck, so we're running Lightning Bolt. It's a single red for an instant that does 3 damage to any target. It's from Alpha, it's so powerful, put it in your red decks. You don't have to use the Strixhaven Mystical Archive printing, but it is great. There are some wonderful Lightning Bolts out there. Chris Rush did an incredible original, just saying. Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares, as I often say, are almost the same card. They are both single white mana instants that exile a creature and give that creature's controller a little bit of a kickback. Swords to Plowshares gives that creature's controller life equal to the creature's power, and Path to Exile lets that creature's controller rampant growth. Search for basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Both of these are extremely strong, unconditional, single mana, instant speed creature removal. So yeah, they go in your white decks. Lauren of the Third Path enters and disenchants something, destroying an artifact or an enchantment. Great. Surge Hacker Mech comes in and does damage equal to a creature or planeswalker that an opponent controls, equal to twice the number of vehicles we control. Very good. Alabu Ancient Witness, we have not seen yet. Alabu is 3, a red, and a white for a 4/5 legendary artifact creature golem. A lot going on there. That gives all of our artifact creatures, other than themselves, haste. That's pretty sweet, with our vehicles especially. Also, whenever 1 or more artifact creatures we control attack, Alabu deals X damage to any target. It could be a player, it could be a planeswalker, it could be a creature that's not even controlled by the defending player. And we scry that much, where X is the number of tapped artifacts we control. It doesn't say other tapped, so we might use Alabu itself to turn on one of our vehicles. Then we attack with that vehicle. Now we have at least 2 artifacts that are tapped, and so we get to shock something and scry 2. If we've been able to tap a bunch of other things, like maybe our soldier artifact creature tokens, like our other vehicles, because we're attacking with a bunch of other vehicles, this could be a huge amount of damage and a big scry for us. Alabu's terrific. Plus, it could just be burning an opponent's face. You never know. Mysterious Limousine is next. We've already seen it. It O-rings something. It exiles something until it attacks, basically. Until it leaves the battlefield, or until whatever was already exiled with it gets replaced by something else. So yeah, love the Limousine. Sky Sovereign is another lightning bolt to a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls whenever it enters or attacks. We've seen the Ham Sphere. It does damage to any target when it attacks based on the number of hamsters we control, and it makes 3 hamsters right before that. But we also have Junkwinder, which I truly love. Look at this big serpent being friends with these squirrels. Love it. This is a 5/6 serpent for 5 and double blue, but don't worry, it has affinity for tokens. So it costs 1 generic less for each token we control. We might get a 5/6 serpent for just double blue in this deck. It's not unlikely. In addition, whenever a token we control enters, we tap target non-land permanent an opponent controls, and it won't untap during its controller's next untap step. So this is not permanent removal, but it doesn't have to be permanent for us to win in the meantime. So yeah, Junkwinder, very, very strong, especially in this deck when we're able to make so many tokens. This can also be a bit of an evasive card, because if we're tapping down our opponent's blockers, well, they can't block. So we attack with whatever we want, and we don't have to worry about getting chump blocked or blocked at all if the Junkwinder has tapped everything down. What's especially nice is because these things don't untap during their controller's next untap step, it doesn't matter which opponent we're hitting with these things. Each of our other opponents and ourselves on our next turn are not going to have to worry about those creatures or those non-land permanents being untapped. So we can kind of gang up on someone. If, opponent A, if we tap down 3 or 4 of their things, those are going to be untapped even during our next turn, and then during every other mutual opponent's turn in between. So Junkwinder can really shift the balance of power at the table. In addition, it does say non-land permanent rather than creature, so we can hit, problematic land or problematic artifacts with this. Or if there are some kind of weird, I don't know what else would be a thing you would hit with this that you wouldn't want to untap with. Sure, if you want to weird someone out, you could tap down their auras. It's a possibility. Usually though, you're doing your creatures, or tappable artifacts like Maskwood Nexus, or there's plenty of artifact tokens that require you to tap to activate them, like food and treasure. Tap those down, yeah, it's a possibility. So that is our interaction section. We're running 2 Wraths. We've seen Calamity of Cinders. It does 6 damage to each untapped creature, and it can Convoke, so it can protect some of our creatures in the process. We also have Split Up from Duskmourn, 1 and double white, for a sorcery that lets us destroy all tapped creatures or all untapped creatures. Hopefully, we're doing all untapped creatures, because we're able to tap down our whole board in the process. Or maybe we're going to do all tapped creatures, because a lot of opponents have been attacking, and we just haven't yet. So we start with the Split Up, kill all their tapped creatures, and then tap our creatures down for even more value. Yeah, pretty nice. Those are our Wraths, and that's our support section. Let's talk about the sections that supplement our game plan now. We're going to start with our Payoffs. These are cards that reward us for doing what we were going to do anyway. We've seen all of these. So Idol of Oblivion lets us draw a card if we tap it, assuming we've made a token this turn. The same is similarly true with Staff the Storyteller. It gets a counter when we make creature tokens, and we can use those to draw cards. Third Path Iconoclast and Monastery Mentor both give us tokens when we cast non-creature spells. Prodigy's Prototype gives us a token when our vehicles attack. We want our vehicles to attack, of course. We care about having creatures enter, so Rumor Gatherer gives us a scry and sometimes a draw off of that. Uthros Research Craft, once we've gotten it charged up to 3 charge counters, gives us a card every time we cast an artifact spell. Weftstalker Ardent, we haven't seen yet. 2 and a red for a 2/3 Drix Artificer from Edge of Eternities that has an impact effect. Whenever another creature or artifact we control enters, it does 1 damage to each opponent. So a little bit of burn for creatures and artifacts entering other than itself. That seems pretty good. We're making a lot of creatures, we're playing a lot of artifacts, we're making tokens that are both, seems great. We can also warp it for a single red, which means rather than paying its casting cost, we can cast it for 1 red, it will enter, and then at the end step we will exile it, and we can cast it for its casting cost on a later turn. We typically aren't going to be using warp that often in this deck, but sometimes maybe we have a few mana and not enough to cast the Ardent and then also cast the 1 or 2 other things we might be doing and making artifacts and creatures enter, but we can get it in for 1, so we get a couple of extra damage to each opponent, then this will go away and we'll just cast it for its full cost later on. Even if it's just turn 2, and we want to cast the Weftstalker Ardent and then our Wayfarer's Bauble. That's 1 extra mana, or 1 extra mana that we might not have used for anything beyond the Wayfarer's Bauble, that gives us 1 damage to each opponent. That seems okay. Next, we've got Welcoming Vampire, which of course cares about our creatures with power 2 or less entering to draw us cards. We've got a lot of those. Kaikar, similarly to some of the other cards we've seen, gives us a Flying Spirit every time we cast a non-creature spell. Sammy cares about us having 2 or more tapped creatures at our end step and rewards us with a robot. Thousand Moon Smithy pays us off whenever we use its backside's mana to cast artifacts or creatures by giving us one of these Gnome Soldier tokens. Alibu cares about us having artifact creatures in general because it gives them haste, but also whenever we attack with them, it cares about the number of tapped artifacts we control, and does damage and lets us scribe based on that number. The Pridwin not just makes tokens when we have non-token artifacts enter under our control, but also those tokens care about us having had an artifact enter that turn, by getting a little bit of power and toughness boost. And as we've seen, the Junkwinder doesn't just care about us having a lot of tokens with its affinity for tokens ability, it also rewards us for those tokens entering by tapping down our opponent's stuff and making it so they don't untap. And that's our payoff section. We have a synergy section as well, which is similar to our payoffs, but rather than rewarding us when we do the things that we were going to do anyway, it gives us more when we increase the number of the things that we already have. For example, Aetherwing has a power equal to the number of artifacts we control. So too does the Brotherhood Vertibird and the Uthros Research Craft whenever we've gotten it charged up to 12 charge counters. Liquid Metal Torque is in this section because it can let us make one of our non-token permanents into an artifact, which is relevant for many of our things, like, for example, the Aetherwing or Vertibird or our Research Craft or any number of other things we care about being artifacts. In Spirit, makes all of our artifacts hexproof and indestructible. Just like Alibu gives our artifact creatures haste. The Jackdaw cares about the number of artifacts we control when we do combat damage to a player with it because it lets us discard our hand and draw that many artifacts, or that many cards, goodness. Surge Hacker Mech counts the number of vehicles we have when it enters and does twice that number to a creature or planeswalker. The Indomitable, if we've got 3 vehicles, we can cast it from the graveyard. Thousand Moon Smithy counts the number of artifacts and creatures we have with these gnome soldiers that both sides of it make. We just saw Alibu. Salvation Engine gives all of our artifact creatures +2/+2, and we've seen the Junkwinder, of course. The affinity for tokens is sort of its synergy mechanic, and its triggered ability here is its payoff mechanic. So that is our synergy cards. We have a section of burn cards, all of which we've seen. Wefstalker Ardent has that impact effect, which happens an awful lot in this deck. Wildfire Awakener makes a bunch of 1/1 elementals that when they tap, and they're going to get tapped a lot in this deck, ping a player. Outlaw's Merriment, of the 3 tokens it makes, the Rogue pings something when it comes in. Doesn't have to be a player though, could be a creature or a planeswalker, whatever we need. Alibu lets us do direct damage to any target when we have artifact creatures attack based on the number of tapped artifacts we control. And Night Paladin enters and just does 4 damage to each opponent. Sweet little burn sub-theme in this deck. And that is our burn section. We have a section of Untappers, which we've already seen all of, but worth checking out again. Ways that let us not just untap our things so that we can use them again when they're untapped, but also let us untap our commander so that we can get better tokens from it. Halo Fountain, all 3 of its abilities let us untap things, although if we're using that last one, we don't really care that our stuff ends up untapped. I guess unless it gets stifled, it could happen. Invasion of Segovia's backside, Caetus, lets us untap up to 4 target creatures during our end step. And the Mobile Garrison, when it attacks, lets us untap an artifact or creature we control. And that's our Untapper section. We have a section with a little bit of protection in it. We also have a pump section. You'll see them both in a moment. So in Spirit, lets us put a 1/1 counter. I'm sorry, since this is the protection one, it gives our artifacts, our other artifacts, hexproof and indestructible once it's charged up to 8. And the Wandering Rescuer gives all of our tapped creatures hexproof, other than herself. The pump section is next, of course. In Spirit, once it's charged up to 1, just 1, we can put a 1/1 counter or 2 charge counters on another target artifact at the beginning of combat on our turn. And Salvation Engine has an Anthem effect that gives all of our artifact creatures besides itself +2/+2. Pretty good. We have a Recursion section right here, which is the Indomitable letting us cast it from our graveyard if we've got enough vehicles, since we're not going to have enough pirates. And Salvation Engine, when it attacks, letting us return up to 1 target artifact card from our graveyard to the battlefield. Our last section is our section on Evasion. We only have 1 card here because we have so many other cards that just have Evasion built into them, like Valor's Flagship, it just has flying. But Mu Yanling gives all of our vehicles flying, and that seems pretty good, including the vehicle token that she makes when she comes in. This is a good example of cards that are in a section that seem like they're alone with that, but we have a lot of other cards in our considering section at the bottom if you want to see more evasive things, that's a good place to look for them. And that is all of the spells in our deck. As usual, we're going to go over our land base now, starting with, hey, our basics are right here. We're running 15 basics. We're mostly white, and our blue and red are about the same, but we got a little bit more blue, so I just did 3, 5, 7. Obviously, we're running the Midnight Hunt lands because this is a beautiful mountain, this is a gorgeous island, and this is the Pumpkin Plains. Who wouldn't want pumpkins? I will mention, though, this video is coming out shortly before the Secrets of Strixhaven set drops. When it does, we are expecting to get new Bicycle and Tango lands to finish the cycle, which means we want to get the Izzet colored ones, the red and blue ones. When we do that, what I would do in this deck is cutting either 2 islands for both of those, or an island and a mountain. 2 islands would be fine since our quantities here are pretty close to each other, but if you want to do an island and a mountain, that would be totally okay. Yeah. Probably 2 islands is better for the purposes of Myriad Landscape, but yeah, you do either one you want, or even cut a plains if you feel like it. I just recommend you putting those in, because here's how the bicycle lands work. Glittering Massif and Irrigated Farmland are both bicycle lands. They are typed duals, that is, they come in tapped, but they have the types of the 2 colors that they produce, obviously, because that's how they produce them. So this is a mountain and a plains. If we were to care about the number of mountains we have in play, for example, which we'll see an example of in a moment, Glittering Massif counts as one of those mountains. So a tap land, but it makes 2 of our colors, and that's already solid. We can also cycle it for 2. That's why we call it a bicycle land. Pay 2, discard it from our hand, draw a card. Something we might do later on in the game if we've got plenty of mana, or if we're just desperate for a card. Glittering Massif is a mountain and a plains, Irrigated Farmland is a plains and an island, and whatever the Izzet version of, like I mentioned a moment ago, whenever Secrets of Strixhaven comes out, will give us, it'll be a mountain and an island. So completing the cycle. Pretty good there. Now, why do we care about them being dual-typed lands? Because we're running the 3 check lands in our colors. Clifftop Retreat, Glacial Fortress, Sulphur Falls. They are all tap lands that come in untapped if we control one of the 2 basics that match the colors of mana it taps for. So Sulphur Falls makes blue or red, but if we have an island or a mountain in play when it enters, it comes in untapped. Untapped dual, pretty good. So if we have this Glittering Massif in play, the Sulphur Falls will come in untapped since this is a mountain. That's why we're running these check lands. You could, if you want to upgrade the check lands, go for the slow lands. Slow lands are maybe a little more consistent, but we do have plenty of typed lands in this deck, especially 15 basics. So with our Tango and Bicycle lands, we've got 19 cards in this deck that can make these check lands come in as untapped duals. Pretty solid for us. We'll have 21 once you add then, or I don't know, we'll have the same number since we're cutting basics. Still 19 once those Izzet Tango and Bicycle lands come in. So yeah, check lands, much less expensive than the slow lands, maybe slightly less consistent, but still pretty good. And if you wanted to upgrade these bicycle lands, I recommend the Surveil lands, since they are also dual typed. They don't give you the ability to cycle them, but they can surveil, which is good card selection. We are running the filter lands. I don't typically run filter lands in my decks that are more than 2 colors, but in this deck, it's just solid, and we have a lot of cards that care about multiple colors, so these work totally fine for us. Skycloud Expanse is our example. This is a land that comes in untapped, and it taps for 2 mana, a white and a blue. However, we can't tap it at all unless we pay a mana into it. So we're tapping something else and this and getting 2 mana, so 2 mana sources for 2 mana, still good, because it fixes our colors. If you wanted to upgrade these, I recommend either the Pathways, which are modal double-faced lands that could come in as either a land that's untapped and taps for 1 color, like red, and the other side taps for white, that sort of thing. Or you could do the Verges. The Verges are also cool. They're similar to the check lands. They come in untapped, they make 1 color, and if you have 1 or 2 typed lands, like, you know, let's say it comes in as a red source, and if you have a plains or a mountain, then it can now also tap for a white, just as an example. So Verges are pretty good. Pathways are a little less expensive than the Verges. Filter lands are cheaper than all of them and are still fine for our deck. We're running these 6 fixing lands. So Command Bridge is a good example of the kinds of lands that we put in our land base based on what our commander and our deck are trying to do. This is a tap land that enters and forces us to sacrifice it if we don't tap an untapped permanent we control when it enters. So this is a land that we play tapped, and it lets us tap our commander. So it just comes in and gives us a way to tap one of our creatures and thereby produce tokens, specifically from our commander, or get value out of other things like Sammy, which cares about us having things tapped. And then it taps for 1 mana of any color, meaning this will make all 3 of our colors, and then if someone has an Exotic Orchard at the table, they'll see our command bridge, and if we have an Exotic Orchard or not a Wayfarer's Bauble, a Felwar Stone, then we see their card seeing our command bridge, so we can make all of our colors with that. Pretty sweet. But if you don't want to jump through all these hoops, we've of course got Command Tower. This is an untapped land that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, just like Arcane Signet, if you want to think of it that way. So it is a white, blue, and red source for us that comes in untapped. Untapped Tri-land is just very strong. Of course we're going to run that. We would run it if it were tapped, like Path of Ancestry. It's a tap land with the same text as Command Tower. But if we use its mana to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we scry 1. As you've seen, we don't have that many creatures in our deck, but we do have a total of 8 humans, including our commander. That's pretty good. That means our commander will trigger on Path of Ancestry, since it shares types with itself, and 7 other cards, which is fully half of our creature base, will give us a scry from it. So worth having this tapped tri-land. We've also got Exotic Orchard, which I've mentioned a couple of times. It is to Felwar Stone as Command Tower is to Arcane Signet. This is the same text as Felwar Stone. So if we have this in play, we've got an untapped land that probably produces at least one of our colors and might produce 2 or 3. That's solid. Myriad Landscape is next. The reason that I was thinking it might not be a good idea to go down to just 2 mountains when you add those Secrets of Strixhaven, Bicycle, and Tango lands. So this is a tapped land that taps for colorless. Or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to search our library for up to 2 basic land cards that share a land type, put them on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So if we're only running 2 mountains in this, we can't use this to find mountains if we've already got 1 in play. But if we've got 3, it's a little bit better chance for that. Anyway, this is a land that comes in tapped and requires us to sacrifice it and pay mana to do so, and the lands it finds come in tapped. So 3 ways this is slow, but it is 1 land drop that ends up giving us 2 basics in play, and that is Acceleration. Slow Acceleration, which kind of sounds like an oxymoron, but that's how it works. We also have Temple of the False God. Not everyone likes this card, but I think it's perfect for these kinds of decks. It's an untapped land that taps for 2 colorless mana, like Soul Ring. This is a soul land. It's just we can't tap it at all unless we control 4 or more other lands. So that's 5 or more lands, including itself. So even though if our opening hand is a basic mountain and a Temple of the False God, we probably want to mulligan it. If we get this out by turn 5 and we've got 4 other lands in play, we suddenly have 6 mana on turn 5 that we wouldn't have otherwise had. With things like Wayfarer's Bauble, we might be able to do this on turn 4. Very strong card, just not early game, which is admittedly the best time for Acceleration, but there's no time that's truly bad for it. So yeah, Temple of the False God's great. We are running all 3 Pain lands in our colors. We'll use Adakar Wastes as our example. This is a land that has exactly the same text as one of our talismans. So taps for colorless or taps for white or blue if we're willing to let it do a damage to us. Everything I said about the talismans is the same, is just as true for these Pain lands, but these are in our land base, so it's even more easy to include them. Definitely want to run those. And if you wanted to upgrade them, you could upgrade them to the Shock lands. Shock lands may mean you don't have to pay life at all for it. And if you do, you get it that 1 turn when it first comes in untapped, and you're all set. We're running, of course, the Tango lands. Radiant Summit is our example. This is a Mountain Plains, so another typed duel, and it comes in tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands. So right now, we've got 15 basics in this deck. A little bit low for this coming in untapped, but it is a possibility for us, for sure. And even if not, this is a typed duel that turns on our check lands, and could turn on any verges you might put into that. Pretty solid for this. Like I mentioned, definitely include the Is It colored one from Secrets of Strixhaven when it comes out. And if you wanted to upgrade this, again, Shock lands are probably the way to go with it. We are running Mystic Monastery. It is a tri-land, which is a tap land that taps for all 3 of our colors. So it's worse than Path of Ancestry, which is a worse version of Command Tower. And it's still worth running. A tap land that makes all of our colors, of course we want to run that. And if you wanted to upgrade this, Rogran Triome from Ikoria is the way to do it. It is a land with exactly this text, except it also has the basic land types and can cycle for 3 generic mana. Finally, we have these 3 utility lands. We're running Castle Ardenvale because we have 9 planes in this deck. That's not a huge number, but it's a solid amount that might make this come in untapped. And then it taps for white itself, and we can pay 2 and double white and tap it to make a 1/1 human creature token that is also white. So this is a way for us to get a little bit of extra white mana into our deck that's mostly white, but also it's a mana sink that makes tokens for us in our land base. Extra tokens, extra good. What do we want to do, though, if we need to deal with land destruction? I know you've noticed I don't have any of that in our spells in the deck. The reason is because in the kind of decks that I build for this channel, those pods that want these sorts of decks typically don't want to see any sort of mana denial. That's totally fine. Not everyone wants to play with that. At the same time, you have to have an answer when someone has a threat. And sometimes somebody's running a rogue's passage or an access tunnel or a secret tunnel that makes it so their giant creatures or their unblockable creatures, or their strong creatures, I should say, are unblockable, which means that all of our defenders are doing nothing. Or all of our damage is slamming up against someone who has a Glacial Chasm, or our attackers are going against someone with a Maze of Ith. Something that's stopping us from doing what we do to win, or that has a land that is making their strategy play out much more strongly than it otherwise could. So it's fair for us to remove that non-basic land as long as we don't deny them mana. Demolition Field does that for us. This is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to destroy a non-basic land that an opponent controls, and then that land's controller gets to search their library for a basic land and put it on the battlefield untapped. And so do we. So neither we nor they are down a land, assuming there are basics left in the libraries, but we've gotten rid of something that was making it easier for someone else to win or making it harder for us to win, which is a solid effect. So it's a reasonable thing to remove in a game of Magic. Finally, we're running Fountain Port. Fountain Port, similar to our Castle Ardenvale, is a mana sink that helps us in a lot of ways. This is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack a token to draw a card. Just turning our tokens into cards can already be very good. We can also pay 3, tap it, and pay a life to make a 1/1 blue fish creature token. Maybe we need to trigger our impact effects, or to have our Welcoming Vampire draw us a card on its own. That's worth a life. And if we're just sitting on a whole bunch of mana and we don't have anything to do with it, we might as well bank it by paying 4 and tapping and making a treasure token and getting ourselves ready for later in the game. And that closes the book on my series of March of the Machine Commander deck techs. The series has been a lot of fun for a set that I love, so please check out the playlist in the video's description for all of my March of the Machine Commander decks, and let me know in the comments what you'd like to see next. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you want to support what I do here, make sure to like and subscribe, ring the bell if you want to be notified when my videos go live, consider becoming a member of the channel and maybe getting to see some videos early, and most of all, remember that Magic is fun. You should play more Magic.